The hall stretched like a cathedral of stone, its towering ceilings lost in darkness. Candles flickered along the walls, casting long, quivering shadows that danced like living spirits. The scent of roasted meats and spiced wine filled the air, mingling with the faint chill that slipped through the massive, open windows. Tonight was the Feast of Shadows, an event where nobles from across the kingdom gathered to witness the Alpha King's power, and where the strongest, the cleverest, and the most obedient displayed their worth. Among the crowd of gilded nobility and polished armor, Lyra moved quietly, her hands steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. She carried a tray of golden cups, the wine reflecting the firelight in 1,000 tiny sparks. Her long, dark hair was tied back simply, her simple dress blending into the shadows like she wished she could. She was a rejected Omega. Once, she had a home, a clan that should have welcomed her. Instead, whispers of curses and misfortune followed her like invisible chains. Now, she served the very people who had always looked down on her, carrying their food and drink as if she were nothing more than a shadow. Lyra's steps were careful. She weaved between tables, laden with silver platters and ornate goblets, nodding politely when a noble's gaze fell upon her. Most ignored her, some sneered, and a few whispered cruel jokes about the Omega who had been cast out. She felt their eyes, sharp as daggers, piercing her back as she passed. "Clumsy girl," a voice hissed near the high dais. A young noblewoman leaned to her companion, smirking. Even her shadow trips in this hall. Lyra's stomach twisted. She pressed her lips together and focused on the tray in her hands, praying it wouldn't slip, praying her trembling wouldn't betray her. At the center of the hall, the Alpha King sat upon his throne, a figure carved from darkness itself. His armor gleamed with muted silver, his cloak flowing like a river of midnight. His eyes, sharp and commanding, swept over the crowd, noting every slight, every falter. And then, unexpectedly, they landed on Lyra. She froze for a heartbeat, as if the world had narrowed to just that gaze. It was different from the others. No sneer, no mockery, no curiosity without care. It was a steady, assessing look, like he could see through the very layers she had built to hide herself. "Careful," whispered a voice near her ear, but she hardly heard it. Her heart pounded. For a moment, she imagined that the Alpha King might speak, command, or even punish her. And then, she continued her work, delivering platters and refilling goblets, feeling the weight of every whisper and stare press upon her. The feast began in earnest. Trumpets heralded courses of roast boar, spiced pheasant, and honeyed fruits. Laughter, sometimes forced, sometimes genuine, echoed off the stone walls. Lyra moved from table to table, offering wine, cleaning spills, and avoiding the pointed eyes of nobles who delighted in making her small. Then it happened. Her foot caught on the edge of a thick rug near the dais. The tray wobbled. Wine splashed over the edge, drenching a nobleman's sleeve in dark red. "Oh!" Lyra gasped, her face flaming. She bent quickly to steady the tray, but it was too late. All eyes turned toward her, and a harsh laugh rang out. "Even the simplest task is too much for her," sneered a noblewoman, her voice slicing through the hall. "Do you see this, my lord?" Lyra's heart sank, and she lowered her head, expecting the usual punishment. A rebuke, or at the very least, humiliation that would last for days. But instead of anger, the Alpha King's voice cut through the murmurs, calm but absolute. "Bring her here." Every head turned. A hush fell. Lyra froze, fear and disbelief clashing within her. "Me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm not supposed to." The king's gaze met hers. It was cold, yet commanding, yet oddly searching. Without another word, 2 guards stepped forward and guided her through the hall, past staring nobles and whispered gossip. The closer she came to the throne, the heavier her chest felt. She could hear the whispers, feel the judgment, see the sneers, and yet, through it all, the Alpha King's eyes remained fixed on her, unblinking, unreadable. When she reached the throne, he gestured to the empty seat beside him. Lyra's hands shook. I cannot," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I am nothing, my lord. I serve." "You are here," he interrupted, his voice low, deliberate. "Sit, now." The hall was silent. Every noble present leaned forward slightly. Their curiosity piqued. They had expected punishment, perhaps even dismissal. But the Alpha King had demanded something far stranger: respect, attention, presence. Reluctantly, she lowered herself onto the seat beside him, her knees pressed tightly together. Every instinct screamed that she did not belong here, that this place was not meant for someone like her. But the king's gaze did not waver. For long moments, neither spoke. The firelight flickered between them, casting shadows that danced across his chiseled features and her anxious face. Finally, he spoke, his voice a low rumble that seemed to reach inside her. "You are not as weak as they say," he observed. Lyra's eyes widened. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. The nobles around them whispered, glancing from her to the king, astonishment and suspicion mingling in their expressions. "Why are you here?" he asked, his tone softer now, almost curious. Lyra swallowed hard. I have no choice," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I was cast out. And this is all that remains." He studied her in silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Yet, you endure." Her heart caught. Endure. Not weak, not nothing. Just enduring. For the first time in years, a part of her felt seen. The hall grew louder again as servants continued to bring in dishes, and nobles whispered amongst themselves. But for Lyra, time seemed to slow. She dared a glance at the Alpha King. His eyes were steady, unyielding, and, "You are mine to watch tonight," he said finally, a shadow of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Do not disappoint me." Lyra's breath hitched. She did not understand his meaning entirely, but she felt the weight of it in her bones, a challenge, a promise, a test she could not yet name. The feast continued, the nobles feigning celebration while tension lingered beneath the surface. Lyra served silently, her movements precise, her mind whirling with thoughts of the king and the strange, unfamiliar pull she felt toward him. His presence was like a flame, dangerous, warm, and impossible to ignore. And then, as the night reached its height, the king leaned slightly closer to her. His voice was almost a whisper, heard only by her. "Do you know why you are here, Lyra?" Her heart skipped a beat. His eyes held hers, dark and infinite. "Because the night is long, and shadows have their secrets. You, rejected and hidden, hold one I intend to uncover. Be ready." Before she could answer, the trumpets announced the final course. Lyra was left with a mix of fear, curiosity, and something she could not name. A storm of questions raged in her mind. Why had he chosen her? What did he mean by secrets? And most frightening of all, what part did she play in the designs of the Alpha King? The nobles returned their attention to the feast, but Lyra could not. She felt as if the world had narrowed to a single thread connecting her to the Alpha King, a thread that promised danger, change, and perhaps something far more profound. As the last candle flickered low, casting the hall in deep shadow, Lyra realized she could not return to being invisible. Not now. Not ever again. And as she met his gaze once more, she knew the night had only just begun, and that nothing would ever be the same. The hall had emptied, leaving only flickering candlelight and the distant murmur of servants tidying up after the feast. Lyra remained seated beside the Alpha King, her hands folded in her lap, heart still racing from the day's events. The noble's whispers still lingered in her mind, sharp as knives, but she could not tear her gaze from him. He seemed different now. No longer the untouchable figure on the throne, but a presence that commanded attention in a way that was quietly magnetic. "You have spirit," the king said, his voice low, breaking the silence. "And yet, you hide it behind fear. Why?" Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to explain the years of rejection, of whispers, of shame that had chased her from clan to clan. But words stuck in her mouth. Instead, she said nothing, bowing her head slightly. He studied her silently, as though weighing her soul against some unseen scale. "You are clever," he said finally. "Clever enough to survive, and perhaps clever enough to challenge me." The words made her pause. Challenge him? She could barely keep herself upright in his presence, yet his eyes seemed to dare her, invite her to rise above the shame that had clung to her for so long. "You are not like the others," he continued, his gaze piercing. "They judge without seeing. You, I see. We." Lyra's breath caught. No one had ever said that before. To be seen, truly seen, by the Alpha King himself, felt like the first sunlight after a long, cold winter. And yet, there was an edge to his words, a tension that made her instinctively pull back. She was not sure if this attention was a gift or a test. "Why me, my lord?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I am nothing. I am rejected. I do not belong here." He leaned back in his chair, the candlelight flickering over the sharp angles of his face. "You are here because you must be," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Because the shadows have chosen you, whether you wish it or not." Lyra frowned. Shadows? Chosen? The words made little sense, but there was an undeniable weight behind them. She felt as if she were standing on the edge of something vast, something dangerous, and yet irresistible. The king gestured for her to follow him. "Walk with me," he commanded. She rose, hesitant, and fell into step beside him as he led her through the silent hallways of the fortress. The walls seemed to lean closer, their cold stone watching them as they passed. Candles burned in brackets, casting strange patterns on the floor, shadows that flickered and twisted like living things. "You are clever," he repeated. "I have watched you tonight, unseen by others, and you have surprised me more than once." Lyra flushed. "I only try to do my duty," she murmured. "To serve." "Serve?" he echoed, one brow raised. "Do you serve out of duty or fear?" She had no answer. The truth was tangled deep within her. A lifetime of fear, a lifetime of rejection, had taught her to hide, to obey, to become invisible. Yet, in his presence, something stirred a small, unsteady spark of courage that she had almost forgotten. They reached a garden courtyard, bathed in moonlight, where shadows pooled beneath ancient, twisted trees. The air was cold and crisp, carrying the scent of wet earth and stone. The king stopped and turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the silver light. "The court will not understand you," he said softly. "They see only what they wish, and they will try to break you. But I—" His eyes held hers, deep and unwavering. "I will test you, not to harm, but to see your truth." Lyra's heart pounded. Truth. Could she reveal it? Could she allow someone to see the real her, the Omega who had been cast out, the girl who feared every word of judgment? The one who had learned to survive in shadows. I will do my best, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The king studied her for a long moment, and then he nodded. Good. Then the game begins. He handed her a small, black box, intricately carved with symbols she did not recognize. Inside this, he said, is something important. You must guard it. Others will try to take it. Some may use fear. Some flattery. Do not let them. Trust yourself. Lyra accepted the box, feeling its weight in her hands. She looked at him. Why me? Why now? He smiled faintly, a shadow of something she could not name. Because the night is long, and some shadows reveal themselves only when the hour is right. Before she could ask more, the sounds of movement came from the courtyard gate. A rival noble, one of those who had mocked her earlier, appeared with a smug expression, clearly expecting to intimidate her. Lyra stiffened, clutching the box. Did you think you could sit there, Omega, without consequences? The noble sneered. You are a joke in the court, and soon everyone will see it. The Alpha King's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steadying, protective. Do not listen, he said, calm but firm. Fear is their weapon. You are stronger than you know. Lyra felt a surge of courage, bolstered by his presence. I will not give it to you, she said, her voice firmer than she expected. The noble laughed, clearly enjoying the defiance. We shall see, girl, he said, before retreating into the shadows, leaving Lyra and the king alone again. You have courage, the king said, his voice softer now. But courage is only the beginning. Strength comes from knowing who you are and embracing it, even when others try to take it away. Lyra's fingers tightened around the box. She realized that, for the first time, someone believed in her, not because of who she had to be, but because of who she truly was. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. They walked in silence for a while, the moonlight casting patterns on the stone path. Lyra felt a strange connection forming, unspoken, yet undeniable. There was tension in the air, not just from fear, but from curiosity, understanding, and something more delicate, something that hinted at trust, even in the midst of danger. Finally, they stopped near an ancient fountain, its water dark and still, reflecting the moonlight like liquid silver. The king looked down at her, his expression unreadable. You are part of something far greater than you imagine, he said. Your past, your rejection. It has led you here for a reason. Shadows hide more than danger. They hide truth. And you, Lyra, are connected to it. Lyra swallowed, her mind spinning. I do not understand. You will, he said, a shadow of a smile on his lips. But first, you must learn to trust yourself. The night will test you, and the court will challenge you. But do not falter. Not yet. Her heart raced, a mixture of fear, excitement, and the first flicker of hope she had felt in years. She wanted to ask more questions, to know what lay ahead, but the king did not give her the chance. Rest, he said finally. Tomorrow will bring new trials, and you will need your mind sharp and your heart steady. The game is only beginning, Lyra. Only beginning. As he turned and walked back toward the fortress, Lyra remained by the fountain, clutching the box. The moonlight felt colder now, but also alive, as if the shadows themselves were watching, waiting. She realized she could not return to hiding, not when the night had opened a path she never imagined. And then, from the corner of her eye, she saw movement beyond the trees. A figure, cloaked in darkness, watched from the edge of the courtyard, silent and unseen by the king. Lyra's pulse quickened. Whoever or whatever was there, it was waiting for her, waiting for the moment to strike. She looked back at the fortress, where the Alpha King's figure disappeared into the halls, and a shiver ran down her spine. The night was no longer safe. The feast was over, but the real challenge had just begun. Lyra clutched the black box to her chest, her thoughts a whirlwind of fear, hope, and curiosity. She understood one thing clearly. She was no longer invisible. She had been chosen, not by chance, but by something far greater than herself. And whatever came next, she would face it not as a rejected Omega, but as someone who had been seen, acknowledged, and perhaps needed. The shadows moved, the night deepened, and Lyra felt the weight of destiny pressing upon her. She could not turn back. The game of power, trust, and survival had begun, and the Alpha King was both her guide and her challenge. The night was still, but the air in the fortress felt heavier than before. Shadows moved with purpose along the stone walls, twisting and stretching, as if alive. Lyra clutched the small black box to her chest, the weight of it grounding her even as her mind raced. The Alpha King had left her by the fountain, yet the echo of his presence lingered like a steady flame, guiding her steps through the courtyard. The figure that had watched her from the shadows earlier had not moved. Its presence was patient, silent, but unmistakable. She had been chosen for something greater, but the night reminded her that danger was never far. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, feeling a strange pull from the box. The carvings on its surface seemed to glow faintly, catching the moonlight as if whispering secrets she could not yet understand. The Alpha King's words echoed in her mind. Shadows hide truth, and you, Lyra, are connected to it. Suddenly, the cloaked figure moved, stepping into the moonlight. Its eyes glinted, and Lyra realized it was a servant of the old court, one who had once opposed her presence. The box was not theirs, but they would try to take it. Lyra steadied herself. "I will not let you," she said, her voice steady, stronger than she had expected. The figure laughed softly, but there was no warmth in the sound. "You do not understand what you hold, little Omega," it said. "It is not yours to protect." Her grip tightened. "It is mine," she said. "It was given to me, and I will not let it fall into the wrong hands." Before the figure could respond, the Alpha King appeared, his presence sudden and commanding. He moved with a grace that seemed to bend the shadows around him, his eyes sharp and unwavering. "Step back," he commanded, and the figure hesitated, then slowly retreated, knowing it could not challenge him here. Lyra exhaled, relief and admiration flooding her. You saved me," she whispered. He looked at her, his expression softer than it had ever been in the hall or at the feast. "No," he said quietly. "You saved yourself. I merely stood where others would have faltered." The words hit her in a way she had never experienced. For so long, she had been powerless, invisible, rejected, and now, beside him, she felt seen, not as weak, not as an Omega, not as someone to be pitied, but as someone capable of strength, courage, and determination. He gestured for her to follow him inside the fortress. They moved silently through hidden corridors, the walls whispering of ancient power. Finally, they reached a chamber deep beneath the castle, a place she had never seen before. The air shimmered with energy, and runes glowed faintly along the stone walls. "This is where the curse begins and ends," the king said, his voice echoing softly. "The past that rejected you. The whispers of fear, they are tied to this place. Only here can the shadows be faced, and only together can we overcome them." Lyra looked around, awe and fear mixing in her chest. The box pulsed faintly in her hands. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice trembling, though there was a spark of determination in it. "Open it," he said, "and face what has hidden itself from you all these years." With careful hands, she opened the box. Inside lay a small, intricately carved stone, its surface etched with symbols she had never seen. As she lifted it, a wave of warmth and power coursed through her, filling her with memories she had long buried. Her childhood, the pain of rejection, the whispers of curses that had haunted her. Tears sprang to her eyes, but she did not flinch. The Alpha King placed a hand over hers, steadying her. "Do not be afraid," he said softly. "Your past does not define you. Your courage does." Lyra took a deep breath and nodded. The warmth of the stone seemed to seep into her soul. Shadows around the chamber writhed, whispering threats and doubts, but she met them without fear. She felt the king beside her, not as a savior, but as an equal, sharing in the challenge. "Together," he said, his voice low and steady, "we can end this." And together, they raised the stone. Light burst from it, filling the chamber with silver brilliance. The shadows recoiled, twisting and screaming, as if resisting their exposure. Lyra felt her fear, her shame, her rejection melt away. They were gone, consumed by the light and her newfound strength. When the brilliance faded, the chamber was still again. Lyra looked around, her chest heaving, her mind clearer than it had been in years. The Alpha King's eyes met hers, filled with something she could not name: pride, respect, admiration, and perhaps something deeper. "You have done it," he said. "You faced the curse and emerged unbroken." Lyra smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and disbelief. I feel free," she whispered. The king nodded. "You are no longer rejected, Lyra. You are no longer bound by shadows. You are yours to command, as much as I am mine to protect." Her heart swelled at his words. They were no longer just Alpha and Omega, king and servant. They were allies, partners in a bond forged through challenge, courage, and trust. A connection deeper than titles, deeper than fear. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Only the soft hum of energy lingering. Then he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, a gesture both intimate and protective. "You are extraordinary," he said softly. "Do you know that?" Lyra's cheeks warmed. I think I'm beginning to," she admitted. He smiled faintly. And for the first time, Lyra felt the weight of the throne beside him. The kingdom, the shadows, all lifted, not by power alone, but by trust and courage. But even in that moment of triumph, the world outside remained uncertain. The whispers of the court would not vanish overnight. Rival nobles would test her, challenge her authority, and attempt to undermine the king and her bond. Yet she felt ready, stronger than ever, and no longer afraid to stand beside him. The Alpha King guided her to the chamber's entrance, where the first light of dawn began to seep through the fortress walls. The world outside awaited, bright and full of promise, yet still tinged with danger. Lyra held the black box close, knowing it was not merely an object, but a symbol of her journey, her courage, and the bond she now shared with the king. "Tonight, you faced shadows," he said quietly. "But know this, whatever comes, I stand beside you. And you stand beside me." Lyra nodded, a sense of resolve filling her chest. "Together," she said. The king inclined his head, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his lips. And for the first time in her life, Lyra felt seen, valued, and powerful, not as someone defined by rejection, but as someone who had overcome it. As they stepped out into the morning light, the fortress behind them seemed less imposing, less dark. The shadows no longer held sway, for they had been faced, challenged, and defeated. And though trials would come again, Lyra knew she had the strength and the ally to face them. Yet as they walked through the courtyard, a ripple in the air caught her attention. From the edge of the fortress walls, A figure watched them silently, cloaked in shadows. Lyra's pulse quickened, and she exchanged a glance with the Alpha King. "They are not finished with us," he said softly, his voice steady but alert. "The shadows always linger, waiting for the moment to return." Lyra's grip on the black box tightened, but she did not falter. She had faced fear, rejection, and the unknown, and emerged stronger. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt ready. Not just to survive, but to live, to fight, and perhaps to love. The Alpha King and Lyra walked side by side, their steps in sync, their bond unspoken, but undeniable. The kingdom stretched out before them, full of light and shadow, danger and opportunity. And together, they would face it all. The night had ended, but a new journey was beginning. And in the light of dawn, the rejected Omega and the Alpha King knew one truth above all. Shadows may return, but so will courage, trust, and the strength to overcome them together.